afternoon, and welcome to Sunday Brunch with Higher Heights. I'm Glenda Carr, and this is your weekly place to be informed, engaged, and to take action. Higher Heights is your political home, a space built by and for Black women, where we celebrate our wins, confront our challenges, and mobilize for the future. And here's what's on this week's menu. First up, we're kicking off with a conversation with Kirsten Allen, a seasoned political strategist who has served at the highest levels of our government, including serving as the former communications director to Vice President Kamala Harris. She's continuing to be a critical senior advisor to the Vice President, and she's here this week to unpack a big week of news about the Vice President, her decision not to run for California governor, and her highly anticipated new book coming out this fall. Then we sit down with former Georgia House Minority Leader, two-time candidate for governor, and nationally recognized voting rights activist and best-selling author, Stacey Abrams. We'll dive into her newest novel, Coded Justice, featured on this year's Chisholm's Summer Book List. And we will explore the deeper themes within her writing, how storytelling can illuminate injustice, inspire action, and help us imagine a more equitable diversity. We'll also talk about the leadership that is needed in this moment, especially as we face mounting challenges to our voting rights and our representation. We also are digging into Higher Heights in the Center for American Women in Politics newest report. The 2025 Black Women in American Politics report was released last week. And we will follow that up with a sit down brunch with some of the leading Black women leaders, including Holli Holliday, president of Sister Lead, Sister Vote, Ashanti Gholar, president and CEO of Emerge, and Tasha Cole, the deputy executive director and chief diversity officer at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, to break down the current and future political landscape for Black women's political leadership. And as always, we will close with a moment of restoration and joy. And this week, we are centering our wellness with our resident yogi, Angel Wright. Up first, let's get right into it with Kirsten Allen to unpack Vice President Kamala Harris's big news this week and what it means for the future of Black women in politics. Joining this week's Sunday Brunch lineup is Kirsten Allen, a force in political communications and a trusted strategist whose work has amplified some of the most powerful voices in American democracy. A seasoned public servant, Kirsten most recently served as the senior advisor to the office of the former Vice President Kamala D. Harris. Her previous roles include communications director to Vice President Harris, special assistant to President Joe Biden, and press secretary to the vice president, positions that have placed her at the center of some of the most consequential moments in recent political history. Well, we can say that this week brought a major development as Vice President Kamala Harris not only announced that she's not seeking office in the near future, a decision that has sparked conversations about her legacy, her next chapter, and what her leadership means for the future of this democracy. But she also announced a new book called 107 Days. I can't wait to read it. There is perhaps no one better to help us unpack this week, this moment, than someone who has been in the room for much of Harris's historic journey. So please welcome Kirsten Allen.
Thank you, Glenda. It's so good to be with you all, and I'm really excited for this conversation. And happy Sunday.
Yeah, literally this week was, wait, hold up, there's an announcement. And then the next day, oh, hold up, there's an announcement. And then I stayed up late on Thursday night to watch the vice president in conversation in late night. So for you to have really had the front row seat to Vice President Kamala Harris, historic journey, right? I remember sitting in a conference room during, like, in Washington during her time in the U.S. Senate. I've had an opportunity to be in conversation about organizing a major event with Black women elected from across the country when the vice president opened up the official residence for over 200 Black women serving across this country. And then, we were on the road together for, well, actually, let's back up. We were on the road together in 2019
Yeah, I was about to
when
say.
she did her bid for president of the United States in the 2020 presidential election. And then that 107-day journey, you have literally been on the plane, you've been in back of the seats of cars, you've been in those rooms as she has created the architecture for what we believe is a Chisholm effect, the continuation of the Chisholm effect. We have now solidly stepped into the Kamala effect, right? Here's a woman who has run, won, and governed on every level of government. And so share a little bit about your perspective of what is next. What does this next chapter look like for the vice president, and how you see her continuing to shape the national conversation about the future of our democracy?
For sure. I think what you said and how you've just recounted her career and your journey and our journey with her is just evidence of the path forward, right? For decades, whether it was San Francisco DA, California AG, California United States Senator, and Vice President, she's been in the fight. She has used every position that she has to continue to fight for what we believe in, the values of this country, the values we hold dear, and to move us forward. And I think this next chapter is a continuation of that, just in a different form, right? She's decided that, and she talked a little bit about this on Colbert, which is, the systems that I fought inside of and sought to improve, right now are failing our people, and it has brought us to this moment. And so I want to be on the road, be out in the field, if you will, with Americans, and carrying that torch and fighting alongside of them and with them and leading that fight, in a different way and charting a different path. And that's exactly what she's going to do next. And keep, that also means that we've got elections coming up, and she's going to continue to try to elect good Democrats who are willing to fight, who are willing to push back, who are willing to make sure that we are moving our country forward. We're going to have a lot of work to do, given this current administration, and she's going to still be on the front lines of that.
I think what is powerful about this week's moment, it actually, when you talk about our journeys, the office of now Kamala D. Harris, and her journey as an elected leader with Higher Heights, is that we have been on the journey together. I remember traveling to Ghana as one of the guests of the vice president, and I jokingly went to her. I was like, "We will follow you everywhere," and she was like, "A reminder that we are along this journey with her." And so to see the joy and the claps as she walked out on that Colbert stage yesterday, to hear the chatter in social media was important. But we had a report that came out the day after her announcing that she was not seeking immediate office. And in that report, it's been 10 years since our first report. We published the Center for American Women in Politics and Higher Heights has published a report since 2014. The vice president has shown up in every single one of our reports in some manner, as a statewide elected, as a U.S. senator, as the vice president, and then her historic nomination as the first Black woman nominee of any major party. She's also even penned a foreword called The Chisholm Effect for one of our reports. That being said, the way her career has inspired a new generation of Black women leaders, from your vantage point, what does the legacy of that look like in practice, and how is it going to shape the political pipeline for Black women moving forward?
I think it is going to sound very repetitive and probably a little corny at this point, but when she talks about the advice that her mother gave her, which is, you're going to be the first to do many things, make sure you're not the last, that's exactly what her legacy will be. And as you said, she's chosen right now that public office is not, her next step, but that doesn't mean that that work doesn't continue, right? Our leadership will look vastly different for all of us, for all people who are choosing public service and people who are choosing to work on behalf of the people outside of public service, right? Outside of elected office, I should say. And so a big part of the legacy that she continues to build is one that is inclusive, but also asks questions and doesn't accept the status quo. And you've heard her say that to, as you know, time and time again, to the women who are involved in higher heights, to elected officials, the elected officials she mentors, both men and women across this nation, is don't take "we haven't done it before" or "we haven't done it that way" as a reason to not do something. For so many black electeds, black elected women, people of color, they're occupying seats that never had someone who looked like them before. And so that requires a audacity to know that you belong, that you can do this work. And that's what she'll continue to go on the road and make sure people know, that your power can't be taken away from you because an election doesn't go your way. They'd like to make you think that that is the case, but that is not how we have pushed for progress in this country.
You have led, as a communications professional, um, lead communication strategy through some of the most politically toxic and racially divisive times of our generation, with the highest profiled political uh, leader who happens to sit at the intersection of race and gender. And it's important about storytelling. So I'm happy to see that not only is she going in and out listening, that she's also starting in this moment to write her story, of her 107 days and her perspective about this moment. How do you approach telling the story of a leader like Vice President Kamala Harris in what, as you know, is a time that she's been celebrated? She's been scrutinized, although she talks about being a public leader. That is part of the role of an elected leader, but also being someone that has been targeted by horrible mis and disinformation campaigns for almost half of, if not more of her decade, more of her career.
I think it starts with transparency and making sure that the story that we want to tell comes from us, and we don't let other people try to tell that story. And that's exactly what you'll hear from her in her book, 107 Days, that is on sale now anywhere you can get books. And that's why I'm excited for people to read it. We all experienced an unprecedented campaign when President Biden dropped out and endorsed her. We were all watching it in real time. And what 107 days will show, and what you'll get to experience, is the human behind the candidate, what was going through her mind in private while we were watching it all play out in public. And it is a personal account, right? She talks about not only the events that we saw, the rallies, what was happening behind the scenes, the speech writing process, but also, what was happening in her family life and how she was balancing being a mom, a wife, an auntie, a vice president, right? Because she still had to play those roles while also barnstorming the country, reminding folks that we are better than the other side, the other side of this ledger, and we can fight for a future that looks like all of us. And so telling that story, not only through her own words in her book, but also in the office of the vice president and in the presidential campaign, was particularly important to make sure that we were also reaching people where they were. In the limited amount of time we had, I think we all wish that we had more time. We could have done more, seen more, talked to more people. But I think it was a big reason why a lot of our communication and her time was used on podcasts and in small outlets that reach very niche audiences. And she's going to continue to do that because, as you said, this was a historic and unprecedented time in history. And in order to know where we need to go forward and elect a woman vice president, a woman president, new candidates, young candidates up and down the ballot, we have to know where we started.
Yeah. And I am so excited about this book. I read her first book, or I should say, I listened to her first book because I do audibles. Um, and we've got a little over 2 months. You're talking about pre-orders. We just launched our summer reading list. It's called the Chisholm List. So certainly you will probably see that we will, we're going to add just like move this book over into the 2025 list, because certainly our community of Black women are, are going to be eagerly waiting for that book to hit their mailbox, hit their phone to listen. And certainly, I'm assuming we're anticipating a tour. She kind of alluded to a tour, because I think this is, in a moment, writing a book in this short amount of time is amazing. It takes often, writers, a year or so to get a book out, and I think it's such a timely space, particularly for Black women who are still, you know, working to move all through all of our emotions from 2024, and to be able to hear directly from her, and to hear her out, talking about this moment. And for me to just leave where I think the most powerful use of her is that
Mm-hmm.
you can be an everyday,
Mm-hmm.
not that she's an everyday person, but in this, an everyday woman, a Black woman that still has a story to tell, that is still ready to fight, to advocate for her family, her community, her nation, and this democracy. What are you so most inspired about as we close this conversation about this moment, as you witness what those 107 days meant to you?
I'm excited about the possibility, right? I think that every single person in this nation who watched the 107-day campaign, participated in so many ways, but also those who didn't and are inspired in this new moment to seek leadership. I hope that they are inspired by the possibility that it also doesn't have to look like it always has looked. That your leadership, your advocacy can take many forms, but it's necessary, and there's room for you in all of these spaces. There is a demand for you in all of these spaces, and what I am most excited about people to hear and read in this book is that, you know, a lot of us aren't born saying like, one day I'm going to be president. And I hope that they're able to see, I think I can say with confidence that that wasn't the vice president. I don't think she woke up at 5 years old and was like, you know what, I'm going to be president. But what she was called to was service. And as we are all called to service in different ways, I hope that people read her book and realize that, like, oh, I can do these. I can do this. I've been in situations like this where I've had to make these decisions, and I've had to push for progress in this way, and I've had to make, tough choices. And that my service can look as big or as challenging or as expansive as I want it to be. Because the time is now. To make it pretty basic, the time is now for all of us to choose our fighter, to choose our cause, to lead with our purpose and our passion. And you'll see that in her book, but also you'll continue to see that as she hits the road, in the coming months and days, in this fight.
Yeah. Well, we don't get to a Kamala effect if it isn't for the team that she's assembled. It was throughout her entire career, her team has looked like America. It has provided opportunities for professionals like you to be the architects of this modern day democracy, and the navigators of a journey that brought us 107 days. So thank you for being a Black woman who leads and being a defender of our democracy.
Thank you, Glenda. And thank you for your leadership and all that Higher Heights continues to do. As we tell the story, you talk about the Kamala effect, you talk about the legacy of leadership, and so many of us wouldn't be where we are without you and your team. So I just want to say thank you to you as well. And we're in this together. We got more work to do.
Well, Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with Stacey Abrams to talk about leadership storytelling in her latest novel, Coded Justice. So, our Chisholm summer reading list is on and popping. Our 2025 reading list has over 60 Black women authors, nonfiction, fiction. And today I'm so excited that this Sunday brunch conversation is with one of my favorites, um, a woman who has authored 17 books, eight of them romance novels. But we're going to be talking about her latest book, which is a thriller called Coded Justice. It is part of a series following Avery Keene, and she is here to talk a little bit about the book, what inspires her as a writer, and how the intersection of her political activism, her creative background, her ability to put information out that will not only inspire but inspire people to take action. So today's author talkback is Stacey Abrams.
Thank you for having me.
So on July 15th, this new book came out. Forgot to mention she is a New York Times bestseller. Things that we all aspire to be one day. But this book really, I've actually sat on in your living room watching you write one of your fiction books, and you were like, I'm in crunch time, you can come over. Share a little bit about how you developed Avery Keene and why this is the story you believed you wanted to drop into this conversation.
So Avery Keene was born of a conversation that I had with Teresa Wynn Roseborough, who is this extraordinary attorney, one of the first Black women to be a major partner at a law firm in Atlanta. She was part of the Justice Department when it did justice, and more than anything, she was one of the lawyers who took care of me when I was still a practicing attorney. When I left to go work for the city of Atlanta, what my mom refers to as my trajectory of downward economic mobility, Teresa took it upon herself to invite me over regularly back to the firm to feed me. So, and to just, to take care of me. And when I left the city and ran for state legislature and went from, government salary to $13,310 as a state legislator, she really was very kind to me. And so we were having lunch one day, and she mentioned what she saw as a flaw in the Constitution, one of several, but in this case, it was a question of why a federal judge could not be removed for simply being unable to do their job. They could resign, they could die in office, or they could be impeached for high crimes or misdemeanor, but they could not be removed. And in Congress, you can be removed simply by not being reelected. If you're the president, we've got the 25th Amendment, but there's nothing for the issue of a federal judge. Technically for now, the only people in our government who have permanent lifetime appointments. And that lifetime stretches whether they can do the job or not. So she and I are talking about this, and it clicked with me that I needed to explore what would it mean if the Supreme Court were essentially held hostage by a comatose justice who was trying to solve a problem where ethics and justice didn't always intersect. And the proxy for that conversation had to be someone who had responsibility but no authority. And that was Avery Keene, a law clerk. So if you've ever been involved in legal issues, you know that the person who's closest to the power is a law clerk, but that person can't sign opinions, they don't get to sit in conference. Like, they have the least amount of actual power but grave responsibility. Avery did such a great job trying to, solve the puzzle in While Justice Sleeps and navigate a corrupt president, not that that sounds familiar, and a Supreme Court that wasn't willing to do its job the way it should. So she came back for a second run in Rogue Justice. In Rogue Justice, she wanted to understand why our energy grid could be so vulnerable and could collapse, and why Texas and California have demonstrated to us we don't actually have a national grid. She also wanted to think about the FISA court, why we have a court that can surveil us without having to tell us that it exists, and cryptocurrency, just to throw something in. And so her third outing, Coded Justice, was for me the next conversation. I did the first book because I was thinking about biogenetics, and this was when we were thinking about mapping the human genome. What were the consequences if we didn't think about it right? The rogue justice conversation is what happens when you don't understand how the power grid works and how our court systems work, especially a court system that can investigate its own people without being held accountable. And now we're dealing with AI. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. It is pervasive, it is influential, and it is vaguely understood. And for so many of us, it's frightening. And so I want Avery to be our guide. So she is now a private attorney. She's an investigator with a company, with a law firm, and she goes inside companies to help them sort of solve problems before the world finds out. And she goes inside a tech company that has good intention, but not necessarily good outcomes. And that's Code of Justice.
And I think what I love about your approach to this series is I heard you recently say is how you started developing the storyline is you ask a question. There's a question you want to connect with, and that is the beginning of the storyline. I think obviously you're asking a question that is related to our everyday lives, our policy, and our politics. You are a powerful storyteller. For those who've been following you for a very long time, when you campaigned, like part of the reason why people are drawn into you about your ability to lead as elected leader, but also as a candidate, was your storytelling and using your everyday life and your family's experience was powerful. You writing as a nonfiction writer and a fiction writer allows you to continue to tell stories. But you also believe telling stories is important in this moment because it is a tool for engaging people in this democracy. So share a little bit about that approach.
Politicians, when they do their jobs, they are storytellers because they're helping us paint a vision of what the world could be through the rules we make, the justice we mete out, the way we serve and share in community. A writer is a storyteller, but so is an entrepreneur. When you create a product, when you create a company, if you are an organizer, when you create a campaign, all of those are stories. My approach is that no matter what medium I'm using, whether it's writing or speaking or creating entities, storytelling has to be the baseline, because if you want people to believe, they have to see. They have to know that they can be a part of it. Now, they may not like the story you want to tell. They may not want to remain in the story. But what I find is that when people feel that they are included in the narrative, even as an observer, they are more willing to actually understand the nuance. And when you think about democracy, you think about the hard things we have to navigate. Storytelling becomes even more powerful. Those who are trying to demolish our nation are telling a story. And they've created a hero, this, kleptocrat who is corrupting everything, surrounded by a cabal of brilliant evil that believes in ethno-nationalism, Christian nationalism, techno-nationalism, and they have the levers of power. And the story they tell is that with that power, they will save those who've been downtrodden and trod upon by those who were undeserving. So they've still told a story about who deserves access to power, who deserves access to opportunity. They've told a compelling enough story that 2 million extra people put them into office. And more importantly, elected officials are refusing to hold them accountable because they believe that story, or at least believe that story is potent. Our job then is to tell a different story. And right now, we're not telling a story. Right now, we're doing Cliff Notes. But we've got to get to the place where we're actually inviting people in, because in a story, you have a protagonist and antagonist, but you have an intention. And that's the place where I start. What's our intention? And the conversation about AI, I intend for us to understand this technology and not let it move us. We have to move it. We cannot let AI take on this anthropomorphized positionality where we think it does stuff. There are people making choices. There are rich people making choices. There are data scientists making choices. We have to tell ourselves the story, and that begins with us understanding the language and the narrative. And if we want to preserve, or more importantly, build the nation we want, our story has to be more compelling, more thoughtful, more vibrant. And I think it can be. We just have to believe we have the right to tell that story.
I absolutely agree that, if you don't see yourself in the story, you actually can't change the storyline. We're moving from their work to discredit and move mis and disinformation to a propaganda campaign, right? In your perspective, those who are listening who are fear of what you just shared, right? We are moving in a very destructive, the destruction of our democracy. From your perspective, what are the most urgent warning signs? You've just laid out most of it, but what can we do? I think you talk about people are feeling they don't see their elected leaders fighting back in this moment. You talk about, if I remember, 11 point, where we are in 11 points, we're in like 10.9. But if you're watching, feeling that we've lost our power, what is your advice for us to be able to push back?
Thank you. So the 10 steps to autocracy. So that's a story. People know stuff is wrong. They know it's a bad idea that Congress passed a law and that one of these U.S. senators who cast a deciding vote is now going around saying, oops, we shouldn't have done that. They know that it was a problem, that there was going to be a 10-year moratorium on the guardrails on AI. They know that kicking 11 million people off of their health care is horrific. The reality, though, is that if we don't understand how all of these pieces fit together, then it just seems like random, overwhelming acts of cruelty. No, it is an organized narrative, but it's also organized behavior that works. If you want to be an autocrat, there are 10 steps, and they know what the 10 steps are, and they're taking those steps. The reality is, though, they're going to circle back, and they're going to take step 4 a few more times, and they're going to tap dance on step 7, which is blaming the marginalized, blaming black women, blaming the disabled, blaming DEI communities for everything that goes horribly wrong. The reason I tell the 10 steps is that's a story. And if you understand the story, then it doesn't have the same power it had before. When our parents would tell us bedtime stories, especially scary bedtime stories, the power of the story was you didn't know what the boogeyman was, and therefore you didn't know when it was going to appear and how to fight back. If you know the 10 steps to autocracy, that's our power. We now know what the story is. We know what the end is. That's why we can start rewriting the story. So if you know that step 4 is to destroy government so that people no longer believe democracy works, then the way you do that, the way you attack it is, okay, if they're going to come after SNAP benefits, if they're going to impoverish our communities, what did we do before we had SNAP? Well, we had food banks. We had the Black Panthers who were out there doing breakfast. So we had things before we had power. Before we had power, before we had money, before we had position, we had each other. So let's remember that's what they're trying to do. We may not have health care, but the very first ambulance services were created by black men and women trying to get access to health care because people wouldn't pick them up. So they built an EMT service. So part of our opportunity is to tell ourselves our own histories, because those are stories. But overall, our power is not something given to us. And that's what Avery is all about. Avery does not have power. She was a law clerk, and now she's an associate in a law firm. If you've ever been a lawyer, you know that is one of the most powerless jobs you can have. But she finds a way to get things done, because not having power does not exempt you from action. What it makes you do is find new sources of power. That's what the people who oppose our existence have done. They lost time after time after time. The war on poverty angered them. Women having the right to control their bodies terrified them. People of color having access to education offends them. And we found our power despite them. So they're trying to tell a new story. So our job and our power in this moment is not the power we thought we had. It's the power they don't think we can find. And my responsibility, your responsibility, our collective responsibility is to go and harvest power from places we don't think it exists. And typically, those are in the places where the greatest harm is. Because in those moments, the urgency of us finding our power pushes us through analysis, pushes us through paralysis, pushes us through second guessing and who thought of it first. It makes us act. And that's where we have the greatest salience, when we are willing to act not because we have authority, but despite not having authority. Not because we know the answer, but because the guess is better than inertia.
That is actually powerful. Moving on to one of the other areas that you've been focused on over the last year was fighting the rollbacks of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI initiatives across this country. What's truly at stake? Oftentimes, is it a buzzword? Are we, one of the things we're doing is how do we shift our power? How do we shift our dollars as it relates to us fighting to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a permanent fabric of this country? What are some of the continued efforts? Because it's not front page news, because every day there's a different front page news, different headlines, because they want to make sure they're decentralizing our focus to then decentralize where we're going to harness our power. What do you see currently happening around the dismantling of DEI?
So let's start with what DEI is. DEI is not a boring HR seminar. It's not simply a buzzword. It is the organizing fabric for America. And I can prove it. If you look at 249 years of history, every major advancement we have made, starting with the Bill of Rights, straight through to the Respect for Marriage Act, including the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, Title I for education, Title IX to outlaw sex discrimination, the Americans with Disabilities Act, we're in Disability Pride Month right now, the Obergefell decision, Roe v. Wade, all of these were DEI decisions, because DEI means that we are using our laws to ensure access to diversity, which means all people, equity, which means fair access to opportunity, and inclusion, which means respect for and belonging for others. That's it. Those are foundational values in this country, and they work. That's why people are so mad. You don't get this angry. You don't issue 5,000 executive orders for something that doesn't mean anything. You do it because for the first time in this nation, everyone has to compete if they want access. Everyone has to participate. We started to level a playing field that started out as Mount Kilimanjaro, and it's still pretty high, but they're angry because it's not quite foothills, but it's no longer the highest peak. And that's what's causing them concern. And so what we have to recognize is that their first attack is to demonize our language, to tell us that DEI doesn't mean anything. It's what they did with CRT and what they did with woke. They appropriate our language and scare us out of using it. And we respond because that's what people do when bullies say things. I don't care. And so I use DEI loquaciously and verdantly because DEI is our language. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is foundational to this country. Number two, they litigate. They try to take away the laws we have. And that's why you're seeing all of these executive orders. These executive orders don't mean much at all. You cannot roll back the 13th Amendment by executive order. You cannot eviscerate the ADA simply by will. But what they did do was pass laws, including the rollback of SNAP benefits and Medicaid, which will directly impact women of color who are caregivers who cannot get access to their services because they don't see that black women taking care of their families is a legitimate job. They basically say abandon your family to prove you're worthy of help. If you're disabled, abandon your community if you want to get our assistance. And so we've got to recognize that DEI is powerful, but it is also legal. And I encourage folks to go to aprnetwork.org. It's a series of organizations I created. We actually have a chat bot that will answer any of the questions you have about DEI, or most of them. If we don't answer it, we'll get back to it. Then the third thing they do is they legislate at the state and local levels. They're going to try it at the federal level as well, because they then want us to believe that we can never have it again. And so I want us to remember that the incredible attack on DEI, the fact that we can name the companies, it's not because they're winning, it's because they're losing. There are 4,000 public companies. We can name most of the public companies that have said they want to roll back DEI. And a lot of them don't want us to remember their names because they didn't mean it. or they don't want us to remember that they meant it. But the larger narrative is, these are all man bites dog stories. Every time you hear about a company saying, we don't want your money, that's a man bites dog story. They don't write the dog bites man story because when DEI works, that's because it's supposed to. That's because we are being the country we say we are. We only hear about it when it's the reverse. We only hear about it when these men, and it's almost exclusively men, but it's not entirely, but when this community of people who are so used to having everything they want and not competing to prove that they deserve it, when they have to actually be in competition, they have a presumption not just of rightness, but they have a presumption of victory. And they don't have that anymore. And that's why they're coming after Pell Grants, because 60% of African American students are on Pell Grants, and half of Native American and half of Hispanic students are on Pell Grants. They're coming after all of the things that have made this nation as competitive as it is, as smart as it is, as strong as it is. And so our responsibility is to not cower in the face of anger and not to shy away from the language, but to use DEI as a noun, a verb, an adverb, and an action step. Because when we do, we force their hand. When we push back, they have to explain beyond the superficial narrative that they've built and the memes they think they have out there. When they've got to explain why they don't believe a disabled woman should have the right to a job and to take care of herself and her family, that's harder to do. When you've got to explain why you're afraid of a black woman competing for a job that you didn't get, that doesn't mean she shouldn't have gotten it. It means you might need to go and brush up on your skills. But we've got to call the question. We've got to use our language. They don't get to steal anything else from us.
Yeah. So, in addition to all the work that you've done to be a political activist, to be a former minority leader of a state legislature that has pushed groundbreaking public policy, to breaking history as the first Black woman major party nominee for governor, to your work at Howard University to build an academic policy institute, and into you putting pen to paper as a nonfiction and fiction writer. In between all of that, what are you watching? What are you reading? And what are you listening to that helps to fuel you in this moment?
So I am right now, I just got into Ballard, which is a crime drama based on a series of books. And so it stars Maggie Q, who I like. I'll watch her in anything. So I'm one episode in, but intrigued. I am reading, actually the book I just finished is, I've been I've been enjoying Wee Child because I miss Reacher. I love that character. But right now I'm reading The Age of Grievance by Frank Bruni, because you can't fight back against something you don't understand. And as I don't want to dismiss those who complain about DEI. I want to understand why they think it's appropriate to deny others access in order to attain their outcomes. And so I'm reading The Age of Grievance by Frank Bruni. I'm listening to podcasts because that's part of what you do when you do a podcast. But it's also fun for me because I try to listen to a range of podcasts so I can get ideas, but also, again, so I can understand what others are thinking, talking about, what is driving people. And I've got another book due in a year and a half, and so I need to know what else is going to scare the bejesus out of us in public policy so I can turn it into Avery Keene's fourth novel.
I was going to ask you, is that next book fiction or nonfiction?
So my next book is going to be fiction. It's going to be a fourth installment of Avery Keene and her Justice series. And I love Avery. Avery has this amazing group of friends, Ling and Jared and Noah. She is a sly character. She's savvy. She's a little bit reckless. She's smart, but she's curious. And having a black protagonist, black woman protagonist in this space has just been a joy to write because she gets to explore conversations and think about issues and gives me an excuse to do deep dives and to explore concepts and questions where I get to push the envelope. I like to say I write stories that are improbable but not impossible. But it also lets me get to dive deep and come back up and say, come with me and learn what I learned, know what I know. Because when we do that, whether I'm doing all the other things you mentioned or writing a book, it gives me the space and the opportunity to share, because we are the most powerful when we think we deserve the information. What gets us is not ignorance, but fear of that ignorance. I don't mind not knowing things because I can go and learn it. It's when I'm afraid of my lack of knowledge that when that paralyzes me, when that paralyzes us, it gives the other side a chance to move beyond us. We've got to not be afraid. That doesn't mean we have to know everything. But if we know the questions to ask, if we know what we should be entitled to, if we know just enough to be dangerous, then that's just enough to make change.
Yeah. And how would you tackle this series? So someone is just going like, oh, let me go grab Coded Justice. Is this series written where you could do it out of order? Obviously, as an author, you're going to be like, you need to start from the beginning. So
No, you need to buy all 3 books because you should support me. But you can start wherever. I think Coded Justice is a good point of entry because of how current the conversation about AI is. And, given the fact that the, Senate luckily pulled it out, but the House was willing to declare a 10-year moratorium. And then a few weeks later, the President of the United States issues an executive order making it illegal for a company that wants to get a federal contract to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the context of AI. And this is actually part of the premise. I didn't know he was going to do this, but that's part of the premise of Coded Justice, that DEI and how we do healthcare in this country depends on DEI, because otherwise many more of us will die if those models don't understand the complexity of our healthcare needs. I didn't know he was going to do it, but now that he's done it, go buy my book as a point of revenge. But also to understand why that executive order is very dangerous. The last thing I'll say is there's a young woman named Joy Buolamwini. She is a data scientist, a computer scientist, wrote a book called Unmasking AI. And she tells a story about one of her first sort of civic engagements where there was a housing development that was going to use facial recognition instead of keys. But no one knew what was going to happen with the data. And if they can scan your face and then sell that data to the local law enforcement entity, or sell it to a company that says that they can package and list all the criminals in a community, and you don't know who's getting your data, what they're doing with your data, and you know that AI has a difficult time with facial recognition, especially for dark-skinned faces, that's algorithmic justice. And what Donald Trump and the Republicans have just said is that the ability to hold them accountable should not exist. There should not be laws to stop it, and those AI models should not be forced to fix it. That's knowledge, that's power, and that's something we can do something about. At the state legislative level, at the city council level, at our school boards, we should be having these conversations. And I want Avery to be your invitation to come in, get scared, see a few people die, and then come out of the books feeling smarter and empowered to go and make change.
And that is what this summer reading list allows us to do. And Stacey Abrams has always provided us with something, a book that is interesting, a book that is inspiring, but it's always rooted in action. So thank you for joining Sunday Brunch with Higher Heights. Thank you, Stacey Abrams.
Thank you, Glenda Carr and Higher Heights, for always being there for us.
This week, Higher Heights launched our newest report with the Center for American Women in Politics, a look at Black women in American politics 2025. Over the last decade, since we first began publishing this report, we've seen an amazing progress in Black women's elected representation. In fact, when we published the report in 2014 for the first time, there was just 17 Black women serving in Congress. We now have 31. There was just one Black woman serving as a mayor of a top 100 largest city. We now have 8. There was just 2 Black women serving as in statewide office. We now have 10. And in our state legislatures, Black women have gone from 240 seats to 401 across this country. And we've recognized and witnessed historical firsts. The first Black woman to serve as Vice President of these United States, the first Black woman nominated to be president of a major party, and the first Black woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court. These numbers tell a story of resilience, vision, and power, but they also underscore how much work still needs to be done. No Black woman has ever served as a governor of the United States, and 34 states still have never elected a Black woman to statewide office. So up next, we'll be breaking down the status of Black women in American politics with three powerhouse leaders for a roundtable brunch conversation that builds on what we've uncovered in this new report.
So Sunday Brunch is all about gathering your girls to be in community, to laugh, to have important conversations. And so this Sunday, please welcome my sister girls, Ashanti Gholar, the president and CEO of Emerge, Tasha Cole, the senior advisor of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and then she will be joining us, but you always have that lay sister. She's usually the first one, but today she's doing the business. But Holli Holliday, who is the president of Sister Lead, Sister Vote. So hey, girls.
Hey.
Y'all have been brunching with Sunday Brunch with Higher Heights from like the beginning.
Yeah.
Ashanti and I have been talking about, did the first Sunday Brunch. We were
one.
in your hometown.
Las Vegas at the Bellagio, my favorite hotel.
And Tasha, you've been rocking with brunches either in support or just when we host candidates across the country. So we wanted to have this important kind of conversation about how Black women are feeling, right? We're in 6 months in to this new administration. We were out in the streets, but you are also the modern day architects of how we even got to 2024. The work that you do with your organizations are all about building the pipeline of Black women ready to run, win, and lead. Yeah. So let's start with a check-in. How are y'all doing, halfway through 2025?
Not gonna lie, it's definitely hard, but I'm just very grateful that in this day and time, this is what I get to wake up and do every day. It definitely fuels me, gives me energy, and to be able to do it with some of my favorite women like you and Tasha and Holli, I feed off of your energy. I just came from the State of the People tour in Los Angeles, which is led by our good sister, Angel Wright. And it was just a good reminder that all politics is local, and being there in the community with people who wanted to make sure that they were so engaging and fighting back during this time, because we know it's always going to be Black people, Black women who are disproportionately impacted. So while it's hard and rough, I still have energy and optimism because of what I get to do every day and what I get to see in this network.
Tasha, what are you feeling and seeing?
Well, for me, it's just been so emotional. It's unpredictable. It's unprecedented. When I see my sisters, I always ask them, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Because it's so easy for us to have a mask on when you say, how are you doing in this political world? And everyone will be like, oh, I'm fine. I'm hanging in there. There's sort of some words that we've got accustomed to using. But I will tell you, when I ask, how are you on a scale of 1 to 10? My sisters stop. They either hug me, they grab my hand, and we have an actual conversation. And no matter where we are, because usually we're in a space where there's other people, and we just kind of tune everyone out. And I find that to be grounding for me, because I want to touch and know how they're doing. I know for me, we had such a euphoria. There was so much excitement around the idea of a President Harris, and for it to be in so abruptly, because I think so many sisters thought it would be a longer post-election, that we'd be counting votes or ballots, and then for it to be abrupt in, I think was emotional. And for me, I'm excited to be in these spaces. I've been intentionally spending my time with young Black women too, because it's been very emotional for them. But then we'll have a win like Coco Gauff. And, you know, like that, see, look at your smiles. Like it just brings us joy to see her family, to see so many people supporting her, and to see her excel. And so I think that brings me joy to know that we know we have the potential. And to Shanti's point, we are the backbone. We are the foundation, but it also means that when disappointment happens, it hits us differently. And we have to take a moment to really understand that and pour into ourselves. I'm blessed to have a FAMU community of Black women that's why I'm rocking this green and orange today, because, you know, only when you go to FAMU can you put these colors together. But I'm so moved to be in this space, and thank you for creating this opportunity for us to bond here and virtually with everyone who is a supporter and follower of the village of Higher Heights.
So excited that our girl finally made it, Holly.
I made it. Traffic was crazy, even on Sunday. What the heck?
So Holly, we were just checking in on everyone, saying how we came out of 2024. We're, in the second half of the year, and just how are you feeling? We're in the middle of really centering ourselves, still some anger. I actually didn't mourn until recently. And so I'm in this weird, different phase of grief that I didn't have.
I see. Yeah, I didn't mourn at all. I'm still not mourning. As you all know, we do a lot with Black women. And yeah, we lost the top of the ticket. That sucked. It was awful. But we won so much more. And so I'm just still grounded in that. I mean, at Sisters Lead, Sister Vote, we tracked 1,204 Black women who ran for office in 2024. Of that, about 51% made it into the primary, the general election out of the primary. And of that, 82% won. Girl, that's victory. And I think for me, especially this year, as we're now in local elections, I want people to remember that power. Because they showed up, they did deep, hard work, they made that moment possible, and they can make other moments possible. So I'm kind of living in that. Now, this administration, on the other hand, got the hairs on the back of one's neck coming up. And so that's fueling, angst and frustration and, let's face it, anger. But mourning, just for the ones that we've lost, but not for the moment.
And we are, our Status of Black Women in American Politics report, it's our 10th year. And so what's in that report is literally the work you all have done, right? This notion that Kamala Harris could run a 107-day election just like she was, like Glinda the Good Witch was like, you run an election. That it is actually the deep work that we have done. And so the report points to in 10 years, we went from just 17 Black women in Congress to 31, right? We have 2 Black women serving in the U.S. Senate at the same time. That's a win.
Big win.
We went from 241 Black women serving in state legislatures to 401.
Amazing.
And just 2 Black women in statewide executive office, we now have 10. And so that's progress. One of the things I've been doing, Tasha, is literally calling through the women of the Congressional Black Caucus. It was a shorter call list at one point. Like, to call all 30, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
And I called 5 of them on Friday, and I literally was like just checking in. Because as you know, our elected women, sometimes people call because they complain, people call because they need something, or they don't get calls at all. And they were like, oh, what do you need? I'm like, I'm just calling to check on you. And literally, these are people who I've known for 10 years who were like, oh.
Right.
And so we're getting ready to go into a midterm election. And so what are you seeing about the women that are stepping off the sideline saying, hey, I'm ready to come to Washington?
Well, so excited about the wins that Holly said that we had on the congressional level. We were able to, bring back all of our African American women who were frontline members. This is competitive districts that they run in. Johanna Hayes, you've probably seen her, at town hall. She's been going viral. We brought back. We're excited to have Janelle Bynum from Oregon. So that's huge. We had not had an African American from the Pacific West Coast since Marilyn Strickland and from from Oregon. And by the way, she is a rattler too, but she has an amazing story, and amazing, she came out of a competitive primary and then came, into a general election, so much so she beat her opponent, so much so that Donald Trump attempted to appoint her, the opponent that she beat, to Secretary of Labor. She can't even run against her again because she beat her so bad. And so I think that's a good roadmap, the work that they have put in. We still have candidates. We still have races that we're looking for candidates. So I always encourage women, if you're thinking about running for Congress, now is the time. There's so many programs out there like Ashanti's and other programs that will, empower and encourage women to win. We have states that, we'll be playing in almost 16 states where we have battleground districts. And so there are plenty of opportunities, and we're seeing women step up. There is still trepidation, though. Women are still having to consider, what is the tax going to be on my family? What's the emotional tax? What's the financial tax? But I think, to what Holli talked about, what they're seeing in the administration, and they're seeing these CBC women. They're seeing women like Congresswoman Maxine Waters, going to different agencies, and they want to be a part of that coalition. They see Amelia Sykes, what she's doing out of Columbus, Ohio, and they want to be a part of that sisterhood, and they want to be a part of making change. And they know the numbers, if we have the numbers, as we increase the numbers within not just the Congressional Black Caucus, because many of these women reach across the aisles. They work with their senators. They have bipartisan support. They have bipartisan ideas, because they know that these ideas are not really bipartisan. They make our community better. And so we're really excited to see that. But we need to continue to encourage women. When they're asked to run, they run and they win. But oftentimes they still have to be encouraged to do it.
And then I would also say that we encourage people to talk about their media diet. Like, a lot of people have turned off the TV, they're using their social feeds and following trusted voices. And if you're not following these trusted voices, you should. But if you're not, follow every single one of the 31 Black women serving, because they are using their social media platforms in a way that is real-time informative. Now, Ashanti, I know that your phone has been ringing off the hook because you just launched a program. We talk about women are asked to run for office. There are women who literally, that were little girls who say that I want to be in government. And then there are the women who something pissed them off. And the federal workers and the state workers have been affected by this administration, are running for office. And share a little bit about how you're helping to prepare them to run for office.
Absolutely. One of the things we always pride ourselves on at Emerge is, how do we meet the moment? We never want to be one of those organizations that's, well, this is how we train, this is what you do. You have to look around and make sure that you're serving the country, that you're serving communities, and most importantly, really serving women. And like so many people, I just was heartbroken to see what was happening to federal workers. I was in the elevator in my condo building the other day, and one of my neighbors, who actually parks next to me, was rolling in all this stuff from her office because she had just gotten Doge. And you could tell she was trying to keep strong. And when I was just sitting back looking at what was happening, I said, these people, these are public servants. These are servant leaders. And I got to work with them at the Department of Labor during the Obama administration. So I know what these people do. I would not have been able to do my job well as a political appointee without them. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving them the opportunity to continue to serve, and that's by running for office. So we immediately put together our Emerge Rising series, focused on getting women federal workers to run for office. And we're really excited about how it took off, that we're actually doing the series again, and we're offering it for free. They'll have the opportunity to go into other Emerge programs. But I love the fact that we've had almost 400 people in those series, but the ones who are most likely to immediately say, yep, I'm running, it's Black women. And that just makes me so happy that we were able to provide that for them, but they're going to be able to take that and provide for their community and serve their community and know that we still need them. As federal workers, they know what works in government. They also know what doesn't work in government. And we got to be honest, we're going to have to rebuild once we get out of this moment, because I'm still very optimistic. And those are the people that we need in there to help us do that as a country.
And Holly, I love that you spend, and again, if you're not following her and Sister Lead, Sister Vote, these local election stats, they are not, they are hard and labor of love, but it is, oftentimes we're always talking about Washington. And so you go, well, how do I, run for office? First of all, white men every day wake up and go, I'm going to be president. Absolutely. And so this notion of you should be prepared and look at training programs, really sit and pray, determine if this is what you want to do, if you want to run for office. But these local offices, right? I've been telling my best friend that she should run for school board, right? Her background in finance is exactly like she's on her, we just watched her second child graduate from high school. I was like, you only got one little baby left. Come on, girl, we can do the school board. So talk a little bit, about, so I'm sitting at home thinking about running for office real quiet and about just the power of like local elections.
So what we don't realize is the more local, the more immediate impact that you're going to see in your community. So the main thing I like to talk about when we're thinking about local elections is if you're a person who wants to see the results of your labor in real time, local is where it's at. Because if you're on a school board, for instance, and you make a policy decision, let's say about history classes, you're going to see an impact in history classes almost immediately. You're going to be able to see that in real time. If you make a decision and you say you're working on a budget, which, by the way, these school budgets are in the hundreds of millions. And if you're in a really big city, $1 billion. So these are not like poo-poo budgets. So you really got a lot of power. And you decide that you're going to, say, advocate for schools to have a mental health professional in your school. You're going to see that process start as soon as that budget is passed and that it goes into implementation. So it's all about, if you like instant results, then you need to start local. I think because we are also turning away from local news, we don't often see it in the media about the impact of local elections. But trust me, local is important. And not for nothing, but great training ground if you have maybe higher aspirations.
Yes, it is.
Good place to learn how to be a legislator and work within a council group, be an administrator, maybe thinking about something like a city clerk or a local attorney general. So yeah, local's where it's at.
And most of our congressional members all served in local offices and in statewide offices. But the poster child of a pipeline work is one of the examples is Kamala Harris. Right? Here's a woman who ran one and served and governed as a local prosecutor, a statewide executive as attorney general, federal level as a U.S. senator, and then in the executive branch as the vice president. And inspired, right, the ability to build an organization. Not everybody needs or should run for office, right? There's other ways to engage in building institutions like the institutions that you are now serving is. That is, Kamala was the muse to emerge.
She's the original Emerge woman. That's what we call her. And not only what she has done, and you like that.
I do.
She's the original Emerge woman. And it's not only her being the inspiration for the founding of Emerge and what we do, but we also have a program called Seated Together. It is focused on getting Black women elected officials to run for higher office, to give them those skills, the network, the resources about what it is going to take. Because we know when it comes to women, especially Black women, people just want to say, you got elected, just be happy you're there, you're doing a good job. And that's something that patriarchy likes to teach us. So we again want to meet the moment and give Black women first the opportunity to have the resources, the training to do our Seated Together program. And it's been extremely successful. We're in the 4th cohort right now, which is packed. But my fun fact, because y'all know I was coming with a fun fact.
Oh yes, come on, fun fact.
My fun fact is the first 3 cohorts, every single one has produced a new member of Congress.
I love it.
So when we were talking earlier about those Black women in Congress, Like first cohort, we have Congresswoman Amelia Sykes, who's a co-founder of Seated Together. And the second one, we have Congresswoman Janelle Bynum, who you're talking about.
Love it.
And the third one, and we got to send her a whole bunch of love and energy right now, is Congresswoman LaMonica McIver.
Yeah.
And we know if it was a person of a different hue and gender, this would not be happening.
Oh, not.
But it's the fact that she's still standing firm. She was there doing her job and protecting people that were in her district, in her state. And that's just another example of what you get with Black women's leadership.
Yeah. So before we dig into our brunch, what is your advice? Someone sitting, listening. We need Black women's voices now more than ever. Over your shoulder, Shirley Chisholm, one of her quotes was, "We need women's idealism now more than ever in politics." And I think that rings true. And so what is your advice? What is your call to action for someone who is quietly sitting at home with their own brunch, contemplating, should they run for office? So advice, and then what would be the one thing, like the first thing you would tell them to do if they're thinking about it?
Know that you're already enough, that it is there, it is in you, and the things that you do every day to take care of yourself, of family, of community, what you're doing at your job, all of those skills translate into being an elected official. And one of the things that we do at Emerge is we demystify the process of what it takes to run for office. Because we know you have it in you. We just pull it out. We take our little lasso, and just really get things going. So I think that is important, because especially because we did not get that big win with a vice president. We did have so many wins down the ballot that we talked about. At Emerge, our Black women alums, they had the most successful year. They had a 70% win rate. They outperformed everybody else in our network. So people want Black women's leadership, and they are looking for Black women's leadership. And do what's best for you in this time. There's a lot of roles that you can play in the political ecosystem, but how do you feel that you can best serve? Is it elected office? Is it being a campaign manager? Are you the rockstar volunteer? But just know that we are needed, and find what works for you and your energy level during this time.
I trust Black women to make the best decision for them.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to get out.
Okay.
Sorry, I love this. Love you, ladies.
Yeah, we're gonna take yours.
I trust Black women to make the best decision for them. I have Black women who call me, similar to Ashante, and say, should I run? And I'm like, yes, if you have this thought, I know you know how to gather the resource, do the self-research that you need. And it's almost like when someone calls you about applying for a job. You won't know if you can get the job until you interview. And even if you don't get the job, that doesn't mean that you can't apply for another job or run for another seat. And so I think, to what Ashanti said about demystifying the process, is that it's okay to decide that you want to run, give it your all, and be prepared for the outcomes. Be prepared, even if you don't win, it's still a success that you went through the process. And look at the numbers that Holli talked about. We're not talking about a glass half empty. We're talking about glasses half full. And I think we have to continue to empower Black women and recognize, yes, it's a business and it's an industry, but it's also an opportunity for you to give back. You can learn leadership skills. You can make connections and contacts. There's so many things that Black women, can get out of this process that we have, that we've seen other communities get out of this process. Even if they do not, meet the moment of winning, that doesn't mean that that is a failure. It's just a redirection and an opportunity. And that's what I would encourage them.
And I would also add to men run and lose all the time. And they use that, Stacey Abrams talks about that. Like we don't oftentimes have the luxury to fail
how often
forward,
rise
but we
lost.
actually need black women to
Obama.
that is a fail like that a fail forward is an ability to lessons learned, right, and being able to take that
Yeah.
let's be clear, like putting yourself out to run,
Yeah.
even if it's like you were someone watching and you are in college and running for student government, or you're running for class president in high school, those losses really build character. And so be free. Like, I want black women to be free to win and free to lose, and use that to build power forward.
I love that. So I have 3 things, and the first one is ditto to everything that you brilliant people have already said. The second thing is black women are already leading. So even though you may be sitting at home, I suspect that there's something in your life you're leading your family, you're making sure that the cheerleading squad has all the things that they need. You're already leading something anyway. So this is really about an elevation of leadership, not like a brand new thing.
Right.
And the final thing I would say is get your tribe. Find your people who will be supportive of your political aspirations and dreams, and there are lots of places out there, and it probably will be a collection of things. Certainly I'm not going to say a plug for Higher Heights. That's certainly a tribe. Being part of Emerge is being a tribe. Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote is a tribe. But find your tribe of people who are going to be in the process with you, because what they don't often remind you of is politics is actually a team sport, not an individual endeavor. So those would be my pieces.
Well, ladies, thank you for continuing to inspire the current generation of women who are leading, and for us building the strategy to expand our leadership. So if you were at home, my first thing would be like, quietly speak your truth today, and then build your tribe and build a plan. Connect with us so that we can continue to help black women lead. So let's do a little.
Yes. Toast. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. Click.
On Sundays, we brunch, but Sundays, we rest. We take a breath. Today, we are joined by our resident yogi, Angel Wright, because leading in full bloom is our summer theme. Isn't just about the work we do in our communities or at the ballot box. It's also about how we care for each other. Angel today will help us pause, breathe, and recenter, reminding us that our wellness is not a luxury. It's a form of resistance and a foundation for our leadership.
Hi, I'm Angel here with Sunday Brunch with a yoga sequence focusing on mobility in our spines, in our backs, in our lower body that you can do anytime, anywhere. So all you'll need is a yoga mat, space to move around, and comfortable clothing that allows you to access poses. I'll give cues and guidance, but as always, this is your practice. So please feel free to take what resonates with you and leave what you don't. When you're ready, we'll meet in child's pose. Bring your big toes to touch. Guide your knees towards the long edges of your mat. Sink your forehead into the mat. Guide your fingertips to the top of your space. And just begin to settle into your breath. Inhaling and exhaling to bring you into this moment. I invite you to set an intention for your practice today. Just something to anchor and keep you grounded as you flow. If you need inspiration, I offer you to share the communal theme of awareness. Just simply noticing without needing to address, judge, or change what comes up in your mind and your body. We'll take 2 rounds of breath here to open up our practice. Inhale again through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Return back to your normal way of breathing. And on your next inhale, shift up to tabletop position. Draw your knees to hip width distance apart. Guide your arms shoulder width distance apart, shoulders stacked over your wrists. And we'll begin with some cat-cows to warm up our spine. Inhale, cow pose, drop your belly, send your gaze up towards the ceiling. Exhale, cat pose, tuck your chin to your chest, dome your back. Take a couple just like that, inhaling and exhaling, following your breath. You can go as fast or as slow as you need to, feeling your spine wake up. Remembering to use your breath as your guide. And on your last cat pose, bring your body back to neutral tabletop. Inhale, tuck your toes. Exhale, downward facing dog. Send your hips up and back. Take a few moments to pedal out your dog by bending one knee at a time to wake up those hamstrings, your calves, your quads, your thighs. You may even feel your lower back loosening as well. On your exhale, come to stillness. Inhale, gaze forward, ragdoll pose. Take your time coming towards the top of your space. Guide your torso over your thighs. You can bend your knees and even widen your stance to support your back and your spine. Shift your weight towards your heels. And you can stay dangled, or maybe you grab opposite elbows and opposite hands and you can sway back and forth, feeling that mobility of your spine. Continuing to breathe. Bring your body back to stillness. If your hands are interlaced, send them back towards the mat. And gently taking your time, like you're moving through Jell-O, rise to stand. And guide your hands to your sides, palms facing forward. Inhale, mountain pose. Guide your hands up towards the top of your space. Press your feet firmly into the mat. Draw your tailbone down. Drop your shoulders from your ears and just settle into this pose. Exhale, baby back bend. Cactus your arms. Send your gaze towards the ceiling. Inhale, mountain pose. Inhale, mountain pose. Exhale, open arm twist to the right. Send your torso to the right side of your space, guiding your arms front and back. Square your pelvis towards the front of your space to deepen your twist. Guide your gaze to your back fingertips. Inhale, mountain pose. Exhale, open arm twist to the left. Send your torso towards the left side of your space. Guide your arms front and back. Pelvis towards the front of your space. You can send your gaze back towards the front to release the intensity. Inhale, mountain pose. Draw your hands through heart center and exhale for stand at attention. We're going to flow through that one more time, linking breath to movement. You can follow my breath cues, or you can choose to follow your own inhales and exhales. Inhale, mountain pose. Exhale, baby back bend. Inhale, mountain pose. Exhale, open arm twist to the right. Inhale, mountain pose. Exhale, open arm twist to the left. Inhale, mountain pose. Draw your hands through heart center and exhale for stand at attention. So that short flow is one that you can do just 5-10 minutes a day. You can hold the poses longer if you need to, or even flow that last mountain series a couple of times. So I hope that that resonated with you. Thank you so much for allowing me to guide you today. And as always, my hope for you is that you take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Until we connect again, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for our virtual Sunday brunch table. We'll see you next Sunday for another edition where we will gather, connect, and lead together. And now we will lead you with our video of the week with Vice President Kamala Harris on her highly anticipated new book, 107 Days.
Just over a year ago, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. 107 days, traveling the country, fighting for our future. The shortest presidential campaign in modern history. It was intense, high stakes, and deeply personal for me and for so many of you. Since leaving office, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on those days, talking with my team, my family, my friends, and pulling my thoughts together. In essence, writing a journal that is this book, 107 Days. With candor and reflection, I've written a behind-the-scenes account of that journey. I believe there's value in sharing what I saw, what I learned, and what I know it will take to move forward. In writing this book, one truth kept coming back to me. Sometimes the fight takes a while, but I remain full of hope, and I remain clear-eyed. I will never stop fighting to make our country reflect the very best of its ideals, always on behalf of the people. So thank you for being in this fight with me. I am forever grateful, and I cannot wait for you to read this, and I'll see you out there. Take care.